right, we are joined now by William B. Davis, who brought the smoking man to life on the X-Files. William, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
So, Jack Lemmon once noted there was a time in his career when he was getting a big head thinking he was something special, but a veteran actor reminded him that there were many who had the ability, they just hadn't gotten the same opportunities, and that grounded him. You touched on that in your book a little bit, and the way you came to the part of the smoking man in the X-Files was similar to that, right place, right time, even though it wasn't the part you'd auditioned for. When you look back, do you feel fortunate to have played such an iconic role?
Oh, I mean, totally. It was quite a remarkable shift in my career and in the perception a larger public had of me as an actor, of course. It was a large degree of chance, but one has to also say that, one has to take advantage of the chance if it comes along. And it turned out that Chris Carter and his cohorts really liked what they saw, what was coming from me, and then gradually expanded it, and the part became what it became. But it was definitely chance, both in the audition process and in the conception, because originally Chris had not thought the part would be anything like as significant as it turned out to be.
Now, there had been rumors of an X-Files revival for years, but now we're set to get 6 more episodes beginning January 24th on Fox. Walk us through that process from your end, getting the call that Chris Carter wanted the cigarette-smoking man back.
Well, I was delighted. I was, of course, nervous about it because it seemed I had been quite thoroughly killed, although it was for the third time, but quite thoroughly killed at the end of season 9, I guess. So I didn't know how he would bring me back. But when we got the call saying, please make sure that his summer is available when we're shooting, I was excited.
So for that first episode in late January, I know you probably can't go into it too much, but can you give us a little bit of the lowdown? Where will the X-Files saga pick back up?
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say. Everything is always shrouded in secrecy, and then, of course, even my being in the series was shrouded in secrecy.
Right.
It keeps being released here and there, and there's even billboards in California with my silhouette on them. So it seems pretty obvious that the cigarette-smoking man will return in some form, but what form will that be? I'm at liberty to say.
Fair enough. I'm probably in the minority here, but the 2 characters I enjoyed most from the X-Files were Assistant Director Skinner and your smoking man. There was just an electricity in those scenes that felt volatile when you were facing off with the intense Mitch Pileggi, particularly in Season 3's Paperclip. What are your recollections of filming those showdowns?
Well, it's a fair way back now, but I always liked working with Mitch. There was certainly, as you say, a spark, and it was fascinating. As they developed the relationship, as the writers developed the relationship, I remember when I was forced to put out my cigarette in his office. That was a big power struggle. Can I smoke in Skinner's office or not?
Right.
And the struggles for dominance kind of went on from there.
All right, well, now the cigarette-smoking man was a very complex character, casual authority, shrouded in mystery, like you talked about. We got just a little bit more of him in each time that he appeared. Did you learn the aspects and depth of the character as the series progressed, or did Chris Carter have a pretty good idea of that role and its motivations from the beginning once it was decided that they were going to make that character a larger part of the program?
I think it's pretty much gone, I don't want to say by the seat of its pants, but it's followed what courses were put out there. And no, it wasn't a concrete plan. It wasn't something that got set down in the Bible and got developed over a number of episodes or seasons. It was just an idea that kept getting developed, I think, episode by episode, and certain writers brought different things to that concept. Notably in Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man, where the character seemed to be, quite a bit different than he had been. There were times when I seemed to be the strongest person in the world, and times where I was having to apologize to the well-manicured man for being late for a meeting. So Things things varied over time, but so no, it wasn't a distinct plan. But I think it was almost more interesting because it developed out of the circumstances, out of the situations, and out of the way the viewers responded.
Mm-hmm. Now, a little bit more of a longer-winded question here, but you didn't hold anything back in your memoir, Where There's Smoke, Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man. On X-Files stars David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, you wrote, quote, "What I saw was an arrogance, a lack of professionalism, and an incivility quite foreign to my British theater-trained habits." However, you went on to note that it was, quote, "a privilege to have been part of both the show and the experience that went with it." Can you talk about that dichotomy of, I don't know if I want to say frustration, but definitely an inability to relate to those key figures and their behavior, and then the gravity of the show's success?
Gosh, when you spell it out like that, it seems a little harsh and a little harsher than I meant. I think there was more of a context to those statements, but there was certainly a distinction. We had John Neville in the cast for a period of time, and John was a superstar in the British theatre and had run major theatre companies and whatever, and was always the most polite, civil, friendly, cordial member of the company. With David and Gillian, you kind of never knew what you were going to get from day to day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes David was really kind of outgoing and together. Other times he was aloof, and well, fair enough. And Gillian was always pretty much aloof. Now, whether this was out of their insecurity or whatever, I don't know. I know it's changed. Gillian's just become just way more open and more friendly and more companionable than she was in the early years. But that may have been just anxiety, or not familiar with a tradition too. I grew up in a tradition of Canadian and British theatre where there were certain just kind of codes of behavior that everybody followed. But I don't know that David and Gillian had experienced those, and they just kind of did what they did.
Now, when you talk about that with Duchovny and Anderson, some of the candidness you had there, was there any negativity or confrontation at all from either of them upon your work reunion?
No, none at all. Now, I don't suppose they've read the book, so I don't know what I said. No, they've been quite delightful to the extent that we reconnected with the revival. Yep.
And now your memoir made clear that you're an atheist and subscribe very much to the hard and fast maxims of evidence and science, but also the genius of the series may have been the free-flowing, imaginative thrust, that willingness to stretch beyond a prescribed structure in terms of the mythology of the show and wanting to believe. That was the motivating factor that drove Mulder. You struggled with that a little bit, didn't you?
Well, it was curious, certainly, because being in this series, certainly a lot of fans just who don't really understand how an actor's life works, or certainly not an actor's life at my level. It may be different. Well, I know it's different at a sort of A-list level, but we take the work we get. I did not look around to different series and say, "Oh, that's a really interesting series. I'd like to be part of that." Mm-hmm. I was just fortunate that they gave me a chance to audition, and other series didn't give me a chance to audition. Whatever, and it's just the way it goes. So here I was with an increasingly prominent role in a series that seemed to, it purported to show that many of these paranormal things were real, mm-hmm. But is it really purporting to do that, or is it just a fiction and saying, well, let's pretend that these things are real? So, Richard Dawkins was very opposed to the X-Files, saying that, it was encouraging pseudoscience and so on. And I was a great fan of Richard Dawkins and thought, am I participating in the spreading of irrational thought? In the end, I decided I don't think I was. I think it was definitely a fictional series, and it's surprising how many atheists and skeptics are big fans of the series, and they wouldn't be if they thought it was propaganda for the other side.
Right. Now, Also, in your book, you touch on a convention experience in Texas where a man asked you to sign something for him to Bill, but he simply had a thick Texas drawl and was actually saying Bill. I thought that was a very funny story, and it also leads into one of the staples of these interviews. Whether at a convention or a chance encounter on the street, through fan mail, whatever it may be, what is the strangest request you've received from an X-Files fan?
I don't have something off the top of my head for that. I don't know if I get really strange requests. I mean, lots of people wanting me to, to autograph their cigarettes and do pictures with we're smoking and all of those things, which are good fun and just fine. But yeah, I think I'd have to think about that. I'd have to dredge my memory bank. There probably are some unusual things. I know there was one in Scotland that they wanted me to go on a skywalk, with a skywatch, I think they called them. They would go out every night, and I guess the pickings were pretty good that they were going to see some UFOs, and thought I would like to go with them.
So, final question here. You'd smoked at one point in your life, but had overcome the habit by the time you got the part of the Smoky Man in the X-Files. By the end of the series, how much did you end up smoking?
Well, it took about halfway through the series before I really realized that. Well, actually, what happened was I was doing a low-budget movie in Montreal, and the character I was playing had to smoke a cigar, and the props person had this funny little mechanical gadget that would light the cigar. So he'd hand me the lit cigar, and so then I only needed to actually smoke the cigar when I was actually in shot. Mm-hmm. And I realized that because on X-Files, we would end up with piles of cigarettes because every take you had to do a new cigarette because you had to cut it to the appropriate length to match the previous shot. So you couldn't just keep smoking the same cigarette. You had to kill that one and start a new one.
Right.
And for the first few years, I was doing all the lighting. I was lighting all the cigarettes. So yeah, I was smoking a ton of admittedly herbal cigarettes, but they're still pretty awful. Until I realized I could get the props people to light them each time, and then all I had to do was smoke when the character smoked on in the scene, and that reduced the smoking for me dramatically.
All right, well, William B. Davis, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with us today.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah,
all right, take care.